I am Zunaira Azhar and you're watching Epicenter. This week's major global development is the general elections in UK, where Keir Starmer's Labour Party has won in a landslide, securing nearly as many seats and as massive a majority as Tony Blair did with his New Labour in 1997. However, a close examination tells us that this landslide is more of an anti-conservative vote rather than a pro-Labour one. Labour's share of the vote is up by just 1.4 percentage points. In other words, Labour owes much of this emphatic landslide not to the people's sudden embrace of a pro-Labour stance, but to an anti-conservative sentiment. Another important aspect is that Labour has lost 5 of its stronghold constituencies in the pro-Palestine candidates who, while campaigning, demanded an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza and an end to this occupation since decades. As this conflict continues to shape the global politics, let's explore in today's Epicenter if it is seen as a pivotal issue in the elections worldwide this year. To discuss this, we have been joined by Mr. Abdurrahman Mathur, who is an Arab journalist, and we have also been joined by Mr. Taha Qureshi, who is member British Empire and an expert on UK affairs. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us. Mr. Taha, I'm coming to you. Experts believe that Keir Starmer's backbenchers in the Westminster are not going to let him be complicit in this conflict. Two-state solution is part of their manifesto already, the foreign policy plan, and they believe that not just that, the ceasefire should be supported, but selling arms to the Israel should also be stopped. Do you see that this is actually going to transpire anytime soon?
Thank you very much, Zunaira, for having me on this program. To be honest with you, Keir Starmer has brought a huge change in the Labour Party. He's brought from left to the center party now. And they are all pro-Israel. They are not pro-Palestine. And those people who were calling for ceasefire, they had to suffer or they had to withdraw themselves from their statements. So I think we must not be deluded in this sense that conservatives have gone and Labour would take a positive stance on Gaza situation or on the Palestine situation. Having said that, two-state solution has been rejected by the many now. The way
by many you mean?
Well, from the European countries, from the Arab countries, from Israelis themselves, from the United States. It is just lip service wherever people are talking about the two-state solution. Unless Israeli government Netanyahu, he agrees to some kind of solution, there will be no solution. And you will be able to see that when on the 24th, when Netanyahu goes and give talk to the Congress in the United States.
Well, all right, that comes as a surprise to me because, Mr. Mathur, I'm coming to you. Most of the countries in Europe who are endorsing the statehood of Palestine now, everybody is saying that there is no other option than a viable solution as a two states to coexist, I would say. There is no other option. How do you see it that while the world is going into elections, Gaza is still suffering, and there is this list of atrocities in front of me, which I can't even dare to mention again and again in my program. As of now, within last 24 hours, 29 people are killed. 5 of them are Palestinian journalists. People are in survival mode. Medication, clean water, all blocked still to date, despite UN continuous pleading to open the routes. How do you see what is happening in Gaza as an Arab journalist?
Yeah, what is happening actually is clear to everybody. Everybody can see and can understand what is happening in Gaza, and everybody even can see what is the reaction from the Western countries. Yes, most of them are going through some kind of an election, There is a lot of changes in their politics, internal politics. Maybe they are electing right people or wrong people or leftists or rightists, whatever. The issue is that those governments are still supporting it. Especially, as Mr. Kursi just said, it is the United States. Actually, the main supporter of Israel is the United States. And I don't see any kind of change, a Western change towards what's happening in Palestine, unless the United States itself changes this regarding Israel and the Middle East in general, which is not happening by the way. Now we are watching also the American campaigning campaigns, elections campaigns, but nobody is saying or demanding or calling for giving the Palestinians their rights. Maybe as Mr. Karashi said, some kind of a lip service that they are offering regarding the two-state solution. I think now the time to the Arab, to the Muslims to realize what's happening, to realize, to come up to their responsibilities and to take control of what's happening, to be positive in helping their own brothers and own Muslim brothers, the Palestinians who are suffering because of the United States and because of Israel. I think nobody in the Middle East at least should be waiting to what will be the result of the UK elections or US elections. It should be an initiative. They should come up. They should work. They should work hard even to support their own brothers.
All right. Mr. Qureshi, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what you said earlier. It is true that this Labour Party is not the Labour Party under Mr. Corbyn. It was more of a socialist side, the leftist side. Now it is very close to the center, right? So does that mean that the far-right movement that is going on in the Europe has somewhat cleansed in these general elections in the UK as well? And if that is right, do you see more offensive policies towards the immigration, towards what is happening in Gaza? Because as compared to Ukraine, there is an ironclad support from UK and US to Ukraine and Israel, but they promised in their manifestos that if they come to power, they are going to support the ceasefire, and not only the ceasefire, also the arms being sold to Israel. Do you think they are going to flatly go back on it?
Well, unfortunately, I'm a very optimistic person, and I believe in the British democracy and the system and the justice. Nonetheless, I consider Labour Party, what exists now, B team of our Conservative Party, as a matter of fact. So they will be following a number of policies, particularly with regards to the Israeli state and Netanyahu's kind of control in Israel. They'll be supporting that. The real test lies in two things. One, whether or not there is any resolution passed within the British Parliament. Now they are in huge majority. They are in simple majority, and they can pass a resolution without any issue to have a ceasefire. Now that will be the first litmus test in my view.
True.
Then the second thing is, are they going to really have an embargo on the arm deals with Israel? I'm sorry, both of these things will not happen, because the government, the previous one, you saw the Prime Minister of Britain going to the Jewish lobby and openly saying whatever Israel is doing, it's right. But still,
to defend itself.
Although the community, the general population of this country, they came out in millions and they demonstrated against Israeli aggression and the genocide what's being committed to the Palestinian innocent people. But there is a huge difference between the ordinary public views and the priorities what the government has. These priorities are not really settled within the British government or political systems. These priorities, they are set somewhere else and then they are imposed. I'm sure you know what's happened in Pakistan, but it's not just in Pakistan, it is everywhere. I remember when the occupation of Iraq happened, Tony Blair was not consulted.
The entire London was blocked. Still, it happened.
It still happened. So if you remember, the Tony Blair was not given any choice to give them any consultation or any advice. Tony Blair was just told, according to his foreign secretary, because he was not involved in those meetings. He was kept out of it because he was a socialist. He was anti-Iraq war. So
right.
I think we do talk about the democracy in Europe, but in European countries, there are also rights and wrongs decided to suit their own priorities.
Right. Mr. Mathur, 5 of the Palestinian journalists have been killed in the last 24 hours. Are you in touch with any of the journalists, whatever are left in Palestine?
You know, the total total journalists who were killed during this war is now 150.
Yeah, the total number.
And this is refugees. One of them is some kind of a relative to me, by the way. And I mean a family relative, not a direct relative. And his wife also was killed, and their child. You know, Israelis do not differentiate between a Palestinian, whether he's a journalist, whether he's a doctor, a child, and a woman, a young boy. They do not differentiate who to be targeted. Actually, they do target the Palestinians, whoever they could target, whether they are civilians, whether they are Hamas fighters, anybody. Because the aim of this war for them is to eliminate the Palestinians, to kill the Palestinians, to force them to migrate, to genocide them. They do not care about any kind of law or any humanitarian law. They never even cared about the United Nations. So a lot of resolutions were passed by the United Nations, by the Security Council, by the General Assembly, but nobody cares. You know, the United States do support Israel. Israel do what its government thinks it is right to be done, and it's happening. Our responsibility as Arabs, as a Muslims, again, I'm saying that we should realize that what is our duty in this world?
It's a moral calling. What I gather from your opinion is that it is high time to follow our moral calling as a Muslim, which has never happened in the past, by the way. But maybe this is the first time ever that we are witnessing a genocide in our lives in front of us, right under our noses, where even UN seems to be like helpless. So we will continue the discussion. Let's take a short break here. Welcome back to Epicenter once again, and let's bring in the focus to the upcoming US elections as well. The human rights sentiment in that election is also actively rallying against the atrocities by Israel in Gaza. Surprisingly, in the initial election debate, neither of the two candidates offered any commitment to the ceasefire, not to talk of a post-war settlement plan. This lack of acknowledgement of the ongoing crisis in the Palestine raises the question if the candidates are deliberately failing to even acknowledge this active and real genocide. Unlike UK, where at least in the manifesto we saw a very clear stance on the Palestine. Mr. Hamid al-Mashriqi has also joined us. Mashriqi Sab, can you please answer this, that it's a known fact that there is a very strategic role of Israel involved in UK and US, while we at least optically see UK's support for the two-state solution, it's very much likely that if the US goes harder in its support for Israel, UK would also follow the suit. That's how important is the role of US in this conflict. Why do you think both the Democrats and Republicans are running silent campaigns on this issue?
Zunaira, I mean, there is a very significant difference between UK and US politics in terms of especially the foreign policy matters when it talks about Israel and Palestine, the situation. The main thing is that we have seen a much more influence and I would say control of the Jewish lobby over American Congress, whether it is in Republican, whether it is Democrats. The problem with that is that none of the presidential candidate would like to jeopardize its risk of having effective relationship with Jews lobby. That is the biggest problem. And that's why they didn't go for any promises or any hope towards ceasefire or the two-state solution. But I believe that the public sentiment is different. Whether it is in Chicago, we have seen the largest, protest. We have seen the protests in New York. We have seen the protests across United States. So people's sentiment is different, and that is the only thing I think which will enforce Donald Trump and Joe Biden to have to explain their policy about the conflict and about the issue of Palestine. And as you know, since Oslo Agreement, I believe that the two-state solution is the only way out at the moment. But
and Mr. Qureshi was talking to us before you, and he thinks that two-state solution is not even viable. It's not even on the table anymore.
I agree. I agree in some way. But what is the other option? What is the option left? Even if you look at the situation in Gaza Strip, if you look at the situation in West Bank, if you look at the situation, it is a clear apartheid. And then, two-state solution was the only solution which was very, I would say, difficultly agreed by the Yasser Arafat and the Palestinian leadership. If they want to run away from the two-state solution, what is left? Do they want us to accept, the entire hegemony of Israel? It is not possible. So I think there has to be some kind of
where do you see the Abraham Accords going? Because the normalization of ties with Israel, if that has to materialize, then there has to be a solution for the Palestinian people as well.
Agreed. But who's gonna talk about Abraham Accord? Who's gonna talk about implementation? Who's gonna talk about the other?
Whosoever takes over White House.
Yes, or who's gonna talk about other parties and other interests involved in it? Look at that. We have to see the interests of other parties in that matter as well. I believe that if they can resolve the solution of capital for the two-state, which is Jerusalem, and that was the main conflict when we talk about the two-state solution.
Yeah. So if they declare it a neutral capital,
exactly, it could have been declared as a common capital as well. That was the only thing I think which could have been discussed and could resolve the issue. Otherwise, the situation will never be normalized. There is no possibility of peace in that region without the solution.
Right. Mr. Qureshi, let's compare the two conflicts. There is Ukraine. Every American dignitary is going there and shaking hands with Zelensky and showing complete solidarity. And NATO is constantly rallying for Ukraine's membership. And on the other hand, there is a genocide where adults, elderly, babies, lactating mothers, they are either under the rubble or in survival mode, or they are in the dust, I would say. Do you feel that the moral compass of the world is broken, and rather than democracy, it is the deep states operating at the moment?
Well, that's really a very good question and a comment made by yourself. As a matter of fact, है जुर्मे ज़ईफ़ी की सज़ा मर्गे मफ़ाजात. This is where we are, very unfortunately. 50 plus countries, Muslim countries, and what role do we have? We have a big financial stake in the world. We have big political ties.
And we have Global South to clench as well. We can do a very active diplomacy with the Global South as well if we want to.
Exactly.
Yes, of course. Very unfortunately, the role of OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, has been very, very ineffective. The Arab League, very ineffective. United Nations, well, they can pass resolutions, but there is a veto always carried out by the United States. Hence, we have no leg to stand on unless the Muslim countries, they stand up for their rights and for the Palestinian rights, for the Kashmiri situation. Now, there are two things here. This is not the first time which we are seeing. I'm old enough to remember when in 70s, Sabra and Shatila, both camps were bombarded by the Israeli army, and 17,000 Palestinians were massacred there. So this is not something first time happening, but it is just that the Muslim communities, they do not, or Muslim countries, they do not learn from the history. What is happening in Ukraine, if you carry out that comparative analysis? What is happening in Ukraine, there is a bigger interest what United States and Europe has, and that is the bogeyman. Bogeyman is Russia. Hence, they can gather the rally around, they can gather the support from the communities and from various countries. Oh, Russia is again stretching its muscles. So they did that. And even one child dies there, we are totally against that aggression. Nonetheless, if one child dies in Ukraine, whole Western media cries about it and they show it 24/7, just that.
Similarly, as when the Britishers or the Australians die in Palestine, there is a whole hue and cry, which is very different from when every day the Palestinians are dying.
So therefore, the Abrahamic Accord and all these the decisions what were made at the time of Bill Clinton, for example, and various presidencies, they're no longer there, because every president in the United States and every prime minister in the UK, they seek support from the Zionist lobby. That is not a hidden reality now.
Is it true for the Westminster as well?
Oh yes, of course. Did you see what Rishi Sunak did? On the last day, he went to the Jewish lobbyists, and he had that kappa on its head to pretend that he is also a Jew. And what did he say? And he said categorically that Israel has every right to defend itself and to kill Palestinians and these terrorists and all that. They just used this terminology, terrorist organizations, Hamas, terrorists, extremists, so that they camouflage their heinous desires under that, within that terrorist definition. Whereas in the UK, now this government, the Labour government, as I said earlier on, that seems to me a B team of Conservative Party. They are not going to change the policies massively with regards to the Muslim countries. Muslim countries will continue to suffer. I hope not. I pray not. Nonetheless, that is the writing of the wall. They will continue to struggle because they are not united. That moral values, the Islamic values, the historical values.
And they're not ready to stand up to the conflict, actually.
Ummah is no longer there.
Right. Mr. Mashruqi, do you think that by constantly denying Palestinian people their right to defend themselves, in a way, Europe is encouraging Hamas and Hezbollah and probably other organizations as well who are going to take the militant route then? So this means that there is going to be a long-term discontent in Middle East. Do you agree to this?
Yes, definitely. I mean, the right of retaliation from Hamas is always very well established when they do this kind of atrocities and when they do the killings of the innocent babies, when they kill, when they do the bombing on the hospitals and schools, then the right from of the retaliation from Hamas and other groups is justified. That is another thing. And secondly, in relation to your first question to Mr. Qureshi, I believe that the Europe and Americans' hypocrisy have been exposed badly in terms of Ukraine conflict. When when they talk about war crimes of Putin, and then when they held him responsible for only bombardment, accusing him bombardment of one hospital. What about the destroying and demolishing the entire Gaza Strip? What about the 4 million people are suffering because of the so-called Hamas attacks or whatever happened? Because I believe that whenever NATO and Americans try to use the tool of United Nations and NATO just to carry on their certain agenda, it is never going to help the peace in the world. They can carry on with their agenda.
So what about the sustainable peace? What about that? Is that coming anytime soon?
Yes. The sustainable peace can only be achieved with the lawfulness and acceptance of the right of Palestinians, the existence of Palestinians, the right of their land. And I believe that that's why, there was a two-state solution. I say that it is a very, I would say it's a bitter thing for even Palestinians to bite and to accept, but they have accepted it. But I mean, if they want to carry on that, the Palestinian and the Muslim world will never be able, whether they don't do anything practically, but they will never be able to support, for many things to Americans, and there will not be achieving possibility of achieving the peace. If they
Right.
want a peace in the region, they have to put a stop on genocide in Palestine. They have to
Immediate
put a
ceasefire,
stop.
at least, to
Exactly,
begin with.
exactly.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mashriqi. Thank you so much, Mr. Taha Qureshi. There has to be some kind of political configuration for the Palestinians and Israelis to coexist in this area. There is no other way to achieve sustainable peace in the Middle East. Let's take a short break. Welcome back to Epicenter once again. Just as people were still processing the debacle between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, the Supreme Court this week announced that presidents have broad immunity from criminal prosecution for almost anything they do in the office. It has thrown Trump's recent conviction and his other court cases into jeopardy, apparently, and could embolden Trump to act without restraint should he win a second term. We have been joined by Mr. Sajid Tarar, who is a former advisor to President Trump and a Republican. And we have also been joined by Mr. Tahir Javed, who is a Democrat. And I'm coming straight to you, Mr. Tarar. Are the dynamics changing for Donald Trump?
You know, the dynamics has already changed since last 4 years when the Joe Biden, since he's the president, and since due to the weak foreign policy, matter of fact, we almost have reached to the Third World War. So the dynamics are already there. The world needs him, the country needs him, and he has a 4 years record now. Matter of fact, you can see. When there was no war started, when the economy was doing good. And matter of fact, the world needs to be thankful to him because due to his efforts, the world got vaccination, matter of fact. And world have seen right now, matter of fact, how America is doing all over the world. It is dynamics has changed big time. And since this debate took place, you have seen the way the Democrat Party is behaving. They are in chaos. They're fighting among each other. They have many issues right now, and the world is watching it. Matter of fact, the sad part is this: the Putin is watching it, and President Xi is watching, and they will take definitely advantage of it, even until elections, till November. So it's a sad scenario. It's a very sad scenario. The world is watching it. The Americans are watching it. And unfortunately, the Democrat Party is not watching it.
All right, but this immunity thing has definitely opened up a new debate. Mr. Tahir Javed, I'm coming to you. There are 25 Democratic members of the House of Representatives who are ready to call for Biden to step down if he continues to look shaky. And 2 Democratic Congress members, both in swing districts, have said they believe Biden will lose to Trump in November. Prominent news organizations, including the New York Times, have called for Biden to be replaced, as have numerous pundits. Biden has said nothing to indicate he will step down. What is going on?
Well, of course, President Biden would say what he feel like it. But there is, you are absolutely right, there's a big conversation between the party. And yes, we only have seen a couple of dozen people openly saying about it, but there's so many others are in conversation behind doors. So this is the most common conversation among the party to ask President Biden to step down voluntarily or find out the ways how the delegates can basically use their votes, and at the convention they can have some other candidate and they might, get somebody else in a replace in front.
But he seems adamant to go ahead?
He is. Well, he is, and this is how everything
But what
starts.
about donors? Because, you know, the way the whole system works, the donors are important, and they are refusing to carry on with their donations.
Exactly. The donors will carry on. Well, of course, there's all kind of donors, and some probably would say that they're only going to donate when President Biden is on the ticket. But of course, I mean, people like me, I haven't spent a dollar on this election, and for last two presidential election, I was in for Hillary's time, I was the top donor, top bundler in 14 different states in South. And during the President Biden's first election, I was the top bundler in Texas, and this time I haven't done anything yet. So I am one of those donors and bundlers who would like to see the change. We like to see somebody else who can take Donald Trump rightly in this election and can represent the Democrat Party. And I'll tell you that this is not just not just a Trump is basically the only issue. Gaza war put President Biden in a situation where a big majority of elected Democrat officials, if you realize that there was a whole bunch of them were against the White House lines and they were asking for ceasefire. And there was a huge, there was a movement in the colleges, especially in the Ivy League colleges.
In the campuses and all that encampment thing. And this brings me to the exact thing that we were discussing before you two gentlemen in the show, that the impact of Gaza conflict on the elections, for example, the UK elections, the Labour had to say that in their foreign policy, they will incorporate two-state solution. Mr. Sajid Tarar, I would like to ask you why both the presidents are so quiet about this discourse that is an ongoing genocide in their first debates.
Matter of fact, again, I have to say how weak the Americans look like in the world, especially in the Gaza war and Ukraine war. During this debate, both were discussed, especially almost America has given $100 billion to Ukraine war, which is not an American war to begin with. Most of us, we know it is corruption going on. Here I have to mention, to tell people, matter of fact, who's Tony Bilkin? Tony Bilkin is a American military industrial complex part at the same time, came from Boeing. Who is Lloyd Austin right now? Came from Raytheon. And second thing, earlier I probably have mentioned in your show, imagine how helpless Americans are and how, again, a weak foreign policy is. Bernie Sanders on the House floor has said it, that we are giving all the ammunition and all the money to the Gaza war, and Israel is not listening to us. So, to matter of fact, this is pathetic situation. This is very pathetic. That every bomb has an American address on it, and every single dollar going to Gaza war has an American address of it. But Israel is not willing to listen. How pathetic the situation can be. I mean, this is very shameful behavior.
Agreed. Mr. Tahir Javed, do you think that the Muslim sentiment and the people who are really worried about what is happening in Gaza, whether they are Muslim or not, is going to be an important factor in the upcoming American elections?
Absolutely. First of all, Michigan is one of the states where Muslim has the impact. If they 100% tilt themselves towards one candidate, so the other can easily lose that election in that state. So, but they're only limited to that state. We don't have enough voting population in any state where we can make a bigger difference. But this Gaza war is not only Muslim issue. It's a humanitarian issue.
It's a humanitarian issue.
If you realize that the Ivy League students are not all Muslims. There's very few Muslims with them. This is all religions, all races.
Yeah, that's why people say it's not Muslims coming out for Gazans. It's Americans coming out.
Exactly. So yes, this war will put the biggest impact And like you just in your question, you stated it very well. I blame both the candidates right now on the ticket who are not
Talking
really
about it.
looking at it as is the top priority and it's a big issue. At the same time, if Democrat is looking at replacing the candidate, and if they become successful to bring a candidate who is not pro-war and wants to uh, move towards the ceasefire and start the humanitarian work in Gaza and other areas. So I think that would make. See, it's not just a one-dimensional decision Democrat Party has to take. They need to incorporate all the issues are hanging out and bring back the slate and bring back the candidate where we win by our slogans and we win with our actions and with our the next, what you will do when you get elected. So I think if they will sit down, do right strategy, we can bring this election back, and beating Donald Trump may not be a bigger deal.
That's
but
not the issue
fixing,
here.
Fixing
The democracy.
whole big picture. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Sajid Tarar and Mr. Tahir Javed, joining us. And this concludes this week's Epicenter.